Sophie was burning up in my arms when I ran into my husband's office. Her skin was so hot it scared me. She was only 8, and she was shaking so hard her teeth clicked together against my shoulder. I had already called urgent care, and the nurse kept asking for our insurance number. But Ryan had organized all the cards months ago and locked them in his office drawer like everything else in our life. I pushed the door open with my hip, whispering, "It's okay, baby. Mommy's got you." And that was when I saw it. Ryan's laptop was open. Not asleep. Not dim. Open. A message had popped up across the screen in big white letters, bright enough to stop my heart. One more documented episode and the judge will approve the temporary psychiatric hold. Make sure Claire signs before Friday. For a second, I thought I was reading someone else's nightmare. Then another message slid in beneath it. If she fights back, use the daughter. It always works. My legs actually gave out. I dropped into Ryan's desk chair so I wouldn't fall and take Sophie with me. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold her, and she whimpered against my neck, miserable and half asleep. I should have closed the laptop. I should have grabbed the insurance card and left. Instead, I looked down at the screen like a woman reaching toward a snake, because it already bit her and she wants to know how deep the venom went. And what I saw next shocked me. There was a folder on the desktop with my name on it. Not Claire and Ryan, not Pamela, just Claire. I clicked it. Inside were videos, dozens of them. Me crying in the kitchen after my mother's funeral. Me sitting on the floor of our bedroom holding one of Sophie's socks because grief had turned me stupid enough to break over laundry. Me forgetting where I put my keys. Me arguing with Ryan when he told me I was spiraling again. Every bad moment I thought had happened in private had been saved, labeled and dated like evidence. There were screenshots of my texts, copies of my prescriptions, notes from some doctor I'd never met, a scanned document with the words competency evaluation across the top. "Mommy?" Sophie murmured, her voice weak. "I'm cold." My whole body snapped back into motion. I clicked out of the folder just as headlights swept across the office window. Ryan was home. I yanked open a drawer, found the insurance cards, and pressed the laptop shut so fast I nearly caught my fingers. By the time Ryan's footsteps hit the hallway, I was standing with Sophie on my hip, my heart trying to climb out of my throat. He stopped in the doorway and stared at me. For one long second, neither of us spoke. Then his eyes flicked to the laptop. He smiled. Not wide, not warm, just enough to make the blood in my veins run cold. "What are you doing in here?" he asked. I held up the insurance card. "Sophie has a fever." I couldn't find these. His face changed instantly. Concern. Fatherhood. The perfect husband mask. He reached for Sophie and kissed her forehead, already performing tenderness. "Why didn't you call me sooner?" "Come on, I'll drive." I let him take the keys. But I did not let him see that the woman who walked past him to the front door was not the same woman who had walked into that office. Because I knew something now. I just didn't know how much. At urgent care, Ryan played the role he always played in public, patient, gentle, a little tired, like a good man caring more than most men should. He answered questions before I could. He rubbed Sophie's back while she dozed against me. When the nurse asked if there had been any recent stress in the home, he gave me a sad glance and said, "Her grandmother passed away last year. Claire's still having a hard time." I felt the room tilt. The nurse nodded with pity. Pity for me, not because I was being betrayed, because I looked like a fragile woman who might break in fluorescent lighting. That was the beginning of Ryan's favorite trick. He never needed to say I was unstable. He just had to say it gently enough that everyone else would do the rest. I didn't always see him clearly. That's the part I'm ashamed of, even now. There was a time when Ryan felt like safety. When my mother got sick, he was the one who drove her to appointments. When Sophie was born, he was the one who stayed up all night walking her through colic. When my father died years earlier and I folded in half from the loss, Ryan held me so tightly I thought love could actually keep a person alive. But grief changes the air inside a house. After my mother died, I got lost in it. I forgot things. I cried at strange times. I stopped sleeping. Ryan said I needed help, and maybe I did. But somewhere in the middle of his concern, my life stopped belonging to me. He took over the bills because I was overwhelmed. He started managing my medication because I was forgetful. He moved my important papers into his office because I was misplacing things. Then came the laptop. Every single night, no matter how late it was, Ryan locked it before bed. I used to think that meant he was loyal to his work. Now I knew better. But that wasn't the worst part. When we got home, Sophie fell asleep with a cool washcloth on her forehead, and Ryan sat beside me on the couch like nothing had changed. The television glowed across his face, soft and harmless. He put his hand over mine and said, "You scared me tonight." I turned to look at him. This man had a folder of my worst moments. This man had messages about a psychiatric hold. And he was squeezing my fingers like a husband in a commercial. "Sorry," I said, because survival sometimes sounds a lot like politeness. He studied me for a moment too long. "You seem tired." "I am." "You've been drifting lately," he said quietly. "If things feel too heavy, you can tell me. You know I only want what's best for you." That line would have melted me a year earlier. That night, it felt like a hand around my throat. I nodded, leaned my head against the couch, and made my breathing slow and even until he believed I was calm. Inside, I was moving at the speed of panic. I could still see that folder in my head. I could still hear the message, "Use the daughter." It always works. Long after Ryan went to bed, I stayed awake in the dark and replayed the last year of my life through a different lens. The pills that made me dizzy by noon. The way I could never remember full conversations. The little camera Ryan had installed over the back door for security pointed inward more than outward. The times Sophie said, "Daddy told me not to bother you when you're having one of your bad days." The way Ryan started introducing himself at school as the parent to contact first. Suddenly, none of it looked like care. It looked like a plan. And then everything changed. The next morning, Ryan kissed my forehead before work and reminded me that we needed to sign refinance papers on Friday. He said it casually, pouring coffee like he wasn't asking me to hand over my mother's house. "Rates are better now," he told me. "It'll make things easier." The house had belonged to my mother before she died. She left it to me and Sophie. Ryan always called it our home, but the deed was in my name. I used to find that romantic that he loved me without needing ownership. Standing there in my kitchen, I finally understood why he had worked so hard to make me feel incapable of keeping anything in my own name. I smiled and said, "Friday works." Then I watched him relax. That tiny moment told me more than any message on the screen. He thought I didn't know. As soon as he left, I called the only person I trusted enough to risk sounding crazy. Tessa had been my friend since college. She was a pharmacist now, practical in the way I had stopped being. She listened without interrupting while I told her about the laptop, the folder, the messages, the papers. When I finished, there was silence on the line. Then she asked one question. "Do you still have your medication bottle?" I did. An hour later, I was standing in the back of Tessa's pharmacy while she looked at the tablets in my bottle under a bright lamp. The air smelled like rubbing alcohol and paper. My hands were cold even though it was warm outside. "These aren't what the label says," she told me. I stared at her. "What do you mean?" She lowered her voice. "Your bottle says levothyroxine, thyroid medication. These tablets aren't levothyroxine, Claire. I can't run a full lap here, but I bet money they're a sedative. Maybe lorazepam. Maybe something similar." For a second, I honestly couldn't breathe. "No," I whispered. Tessa's face softened, but she didn't look surprised. "How long have you been taking them?" "Months." She closed her eyes. I grabbed the edge of the counter because the room had gone watery around the edges. All those mornings I couldn't think straight. All those afternoons I felt wrapped in cotton. All those times Ryan sighed and said, "See, this is what I'd been worried about." He hadn't been watching me fall apart. He had been building the fall. I didn't know what was coming next. And that was the most terrifying part. Tessa wanted me to go straight to the police. But fear makes simple things complicated. What would I say? My husband was secretly drugging me, filming me, and planning to have me declared unstable so he could take my child and my house. I barely believed it myself, and I had read the messages with my own eyes. "Get proof," she said. "Real proof. And don't let him know you're suspicious." I nodded, but I already knew what getting proof meant. I had to go back into that office. That night, Ryan was unusually affectionate. He brought home takeout from my favorite Thai place. He helped Sophie with homework. He wrapped an arm around my waist while I loaded the dishwasher and asked, "You okay today? You seem distant." I wanted to shove him so hard he hit the counter. Instead, I smiled weakly and said, "Just tired." "Take your medicine after dinner," he murmured, kissing my temple. "It helps when you stay consistent." The words almost made me throw up. Later, when Ryan was in the shower, I slipped into the office with my phone and one of Sophie's old flash drives. My pulse beat so hard and my neck it hurt. The laptop password had changed a few times over the years, but Ryan had one weakness. He believed I stopped paying attention once he started treating me like a child. He still used the same base pattern. His college mascot, our anniversary, an exclamation point, the screen opened. I moved fast. I copied the folder with my name, then another folder called legal, then a third one called EH. I almost skipped that last one because I didn't know what it meant. But something about the way it sat there buried, unlabeled, too plain made my stomach twist. Halfway through the transfer, I heard the shower turn off. My blood went cold. I pulled the flash drive out before the last file finished, shut the laptop, and barely made it into the hallway before Ryan opened the bathroom door in a cloud of steam. He smiled when he saw me. Couldn't sleep? I tucked my hand behind my back. Just checking on Sophie. His eyes dropped for a second, like he was measuring the space between us. Then he said, "You've always been such a good mother." I knew it was praise. I also knew it was a warning. What I found on that flash drive the next morning made my skin crawl. The folder with my name was worse than I remembered. There were typed notes from Ryan about my moods, dates, triggers, reaction times. It read less like a husband's concern and more like a hunter's field journal. Cried for 11 minutes after old voicemail from mother. Disoriented after medication, 2:15 p.m. Raised voice when Sophie mentioned school volunteer form. There was a draft petition to appoint Ryan temporary conservator over my finances pending psychiatric review. There was a separate draft asking for temporary sole decision-making authority over Sophie due to my increasing unpredictability. And in the EHN's folder, there was a scanned copy of a family court case from another state. The petitioner was a woman named Elena Hart. The respondent was Ryan. I had never heard that name in my life. But that wasn't the end of it. There was a number attached to one of the documents. My hands shook as I typed it into my phone. I stared at it for a full minute before hitting call. A woman answered on the third ring. "Hello?" I almost hung up. Instead, I said, "My name is Claire. I think you were married to my husband." There was a long silence. Then, in a voice so flat it scared me, she said, "Did you find the laptop?" Every hair on my body stood up. We met in the parking lot behind a church across town because Elena said Ryan used to track her favorite places. That sentence alone told me I had stepped into a bigger nightmare than I understood. She was thinner than I expected, with nervous eyes and a calm voice that felt learned the hard way. She sat across from me in her old sedan, both of us pretending not to notice how often we checked the mirrors. "He told me I was sick," she said. "That's how it starts." I couldn't speak. Elena folded her hands in her lap like she was trying to keep them from shaking. After my son was born, I had postpartum depression. Real depression. I needed help, and Ryan made sure he was the one giving it to me. He controlled my medication. He recorded me crying. He told my family he was scared for the baby. By the time I realized what he was doing, he had a lawyer, a doctor, and a file full of moments that looked terrible without context. My mouth went dry. What happened? He got temporary custody. She laughed once, but there was no humor in it. The judge called him attentive, stable, protective. I was advised not to fight too hard until I was well enough to present better. I heard the crack in her voice on the last two words. "I lost everything first," she said quietly. Then I got angry. I looked at her, really looked at her, and understood something terrible. Ryan had done this before. Not maybe. Not almost. Before, I whispered, "Why didn't anyone stop him?" Elena turned to me with eyes that looked exhausted all the way to the bone. "Because men like Ryan don't scream in public, Claire. They organize. They smile. They collect evidence while they create the damage. And by the time you sound desperate enough to tell the truth, your desperation becomes proof against you." I sat there frozen, hearing my own life explained by a stranger. Then Elena said something that made the air leave the car. "If he knows you're onto him, he'll move faster." And then everything changed again. That same afternoon, Ryan called from work and asked if I had time to meet a family counselor with him later in the week. He said he wanted extra support for us. His voice was warm, concerned, almost tender. I said yes. 2 hours later, his sister Dana showed up unannounced with muffins and the expression she always wore around me lately, half pity, half judgment. She sat at my kitchen table and started talking about stress, healing, and the importance of letting Ryan help. Then she slid a folder toward me. Inside was a power of attorney form. "For emergencies," she said lightly, "just in case you have another rough patch." I stared at her. Dana pressed her lips together. Claire, you have to understand how hard this has been on Ryan. He's carrying so much. I wanted to ask if carrying so much included drugging me, filming me, and preparing to steal my daughter. Instead, I said, I'm not signing anything. The room went still. Dana's voice lost its softness first. Don't make this uglier than it needs to be. I looked up at her so fast she leaned back. Uglier, I repeated. She stood. You're emotional right now. There it was again. That word, emotional right now. There it was again. That word, emotional. The pretty little coffin they kept trying to slide me into. After she left, I found Ryan in the driveway that evening staring at me before he even got out of the car. Dana had called him already. Of course she had. He came inside quietly. Too quietly. Sophie was upstairs brushing her teeth, and the house felt like it was holding its breath. I heard you upset Dana, he said. I kept folding laundry because my hands needed something to do. She came here with legal forms. She was trying to help. No, I said, finally looking at him. She was trying to take control of my life. His jaw tightened. For a second, I saw the real Ryan, not the patient husband, not the worried father, just the cold anger beneath the costume. Then his phone was in his hand. He started recording me. I stopped moving. What are you doing? His voice turned careful. You're escalating. I felt actual panic flash through me. Ryan, Claire, calm down. I am calm. He took one step closer, camera still up. You're scaring me. That was when I understood how easy it would be for him. One shove, one raised voice, one desperate movement toward his phone, and suddenly I'd be another clip in the folder. So I did the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. I dropped the towel I was holding, backed away, and said in the quietest voice I can manage, please stop recording me. His eyes changed. He had expected a fight. When he didn't get one, he looked disappointed. But that wasn't the worst part. The police officer at the front desk the next morning listened politely, then asked if I had copies of the messages, proof the medication had been switched, or evidence of immediate danger to my daughter. I had some of it, but not enough. Not yet. He told me to document everything, consider a lawyer, and call emergency services if Ryan became violent. Violent. As if the danger had to leave bruises to count. I left the station feeling smaller than I had in years. Ryan had already spent months shaping the story of who I was. Every day I waited, his version grew heavier. That evening, when I came out of the grocery store, it was an envelope tucked under my windshield wiper. No stamp, no name. Inside was a single folded page from Ryan's office printer. Monday, file temporary psychiatric hold. Tuesday, school notification, release only to father if mother in crisis. Thursday, signing deed transfer. At the bottom, written in blue ink, were 5 words. He stores backups in the cloud. No signature, no explanation. Just enough to let me know someone else inside Ryan's world had finally decided to break rank. I called Elena from the parking lot and she said, whoever sent that is terrified. Use it. So I did. Ryan was out late that night meeting a client. I knew that might have been true and I knew it didn't matter. When a man is planning the theft of your life, whether he also cheats becomes almost irrelevant. I went into the office again. This time I wasn't trembling the same way. Fear was still there, but it had hardened. It had edges now. Ryan used a cloud service that automatically synced his desktop. I found it under saved passwords in the browser settings because arrogant men always assume the people they underestimated will stay underestimated. There were backups going back 2 years. 2 years. I opened files until my vision blurred. Audio clips, legal drafts, bank transfers, emails with a psychiatrist who had never treated me directly but was willing to review documented behaviors, messages with Dana, messages with someone saved as in. Then I found a deleted voicemail Ryan had downloaded and never erased from the cloud. The file name was simple, Mom Old. My finger hovered over the trackpad. Then I clicked. My mother's voice filled the office. Thin. Tired, angry. Claire, if you hear this, call me back. Don't tell Ryan. I found papers in his bag with the house number and my signature copied. He says it's nothing, but I know what I saw. If something feels wrong, trust yourself this time. Please. The message ended. I didn't realize I was crying until a tear hit the keyboard. Trust yourself this time. My mother had known something was wrong before she died, and I had been too exhausted, too grief-drunk, too trusting to hear it in time. What I found next broke something open inside me. Buried in a file labeled Home Repair was a video clip from our old kitchen camera. The one Ryan said had stopped working months before my mother's fall. The footage showed my mother standing by the counter in her robe, one hand braced against the edge like she was weak. Ryan was in front of her. I couldn't hear the first few seconds because the audio glitched, but I saw my mother point toward the back hallway with a fury I hadn't seen since I was a teenager. Then the sound snapped in. Not her house, Ryan. You don't get to do this. Ryan's voice was low. She can't manage it. She can manage you just fine when she knows what you are. He stepped closer. My mother shoved his shoulder. The camera jolted as if someone had bumped the table where it sat. Then I heard my mother gasp. The picture blurred, and the audio kept going. A thud. A horrible scraping sound. Ryan swearing under his breath. Then, after 3 long seconds that sounded like a lifetime, his voice again. Diane, another second. Oh God, then nothing. The file cut off there. I sat frozen, staring at a screen I could no longer feel my hands touching. My mother had died from a fall down the back steps. Ryan said he found her at the bottom and called 911 immediately. I had believed him because grief needs a place to kneel, and I had chosen the nearest altar. Now I had proof that he was with her. Proof there had been an argument. Proof that he had lied. And that was the moment I understood the full shape of the man I had married. This was never just about custody. Never just about custody. Ryan didn't simply take advantage of pain. He created it, then arranged the evidence around it. I didn't know what was coming next, but I knew one thing with absolute clarity. I was done being afraid of sounding insane. I copied every file I could find and drove straight to Elena's apartment with the sun just starting to come up. She opened the door in sweatpants and one sock, took one look at my face, and stepped aside without a word. We spent the next 3 hours on her couch, going through everything. By the time Tessa arrived, because I had called her on the way and told her only, I need you. We had a timeline. Ryan manipulated medication. Ryan built a case for my psychiatric hold. Ryan coordinated with his sister. Ryan prepared documents to gain control of my house and daughter. And now, with the kitchen camera file and my mother's voicemail, Ryan was tied to a lie about the day she died. Elena leaned back against the couch and said, "This is enough to make him dangerous." Tessa looked at me. Then we moved first. For the first time in months, I didn't hesitate. We called a lawyer Elena trusted from her custody case. We called a detective Tessa's husband knew through the hospital board. We made copies of everything in 3 places. We documented my medication. We took photos. We wrote dates. I should tell you, I felt strong then. I didn't. I felt sick, grieving, guilty, furious. I felt like every memory in my marriage had been picked up and shaken until the real shape fell out. But underneath all of it, there was something new. A line. Ryan had crossed it. And I was never going to step back behind it again. But that wasn't the end, not even close. When I came home that afternoon, Ryan was already there. He never came home early. Sophie was in the living room coloring at the coffee table. Ryan sat on the couch beside her in his work clothes, smiling too easily. "There you are," he said. I was getting worried. My skin went cold. He had found something. Maybe the cloud access. Maybe the missing files. Maybe the fact that I hadn't been answering fast enough. I knelt beside Sophie and kissed the top of her head. Traffic. Ryan stood. "Can we talk in the kitchen?" I wanted to refuse, but fear teaches you when privacy becomes danger. I looked at Sophie. She looked back at me, already sensing the weather shift in the room. "In here is fine," I said. Ryan smiled, but his eyes didn't. "Claire." I stood slowly and followed him into the kitchen anyway. The moment we were alone, he dropped the mask. "Have you been in my office?" There it was. I forced a confused frown. "What? Don't do that." His voice sharpened. "I know when you've been touching things." For one wild second, I thought he might hit me. Instead, he leaned both hands on the counter and smiled in a way that made me understand why Elena had looked over her shoulder even in daylight. "I've tried so hard to be patient with you," he said. "Do you know that?" My throat burned, but I said nothing. He stepped closer. "You are making this harder than it needs to be." "Making what harder?" "Our arrangement," he said softly. "Your recovery, Sophie's stability, everything." There it was again, his favorite word when he meant obedience. Then he said, "I think a few weeks of inpatient treatment might be best." My vision tunneled. He was moving now. He was done waiting for Friday. And then everything changed again. That night, Sophie crawled into my bed after midnight and whispered, "Mommy, am I in trouble?" I turned on the lamp and saw tears on her cheeks. No, baby. Never. She twisted the hem of her pajama shirt. Daddy said if you get too sad, I might have to stay with Aunt Dana for a while. He said it's because grown-ups have rules. There are moments when your heart doesn't break cleanly. It tears in strips. I pulled her into my arms and held her so tightly she squeaked. Listen to me. Whatever anyone says, I am not leaving you. Do you hear me? She nodded against my chest. Has Daddy said things like that before? A pause. Sometimes. I closed my eyes. Ryan had already started planting fear in her. Not later. Not eventually. Already. The next morning, our lawyer filed emergency motions before Ryan could file his. The detective took copies of the voicemail, the camera clip, and the medication photos. Tessa kept the original pill bottle. Elena signed a statement about Ryan's past behavior. Every hour mattered now. Then Nora called. She was Ryan's assistant. So the N in his messages finally had a face. Her voice trembled when she said, I can't do this anymore. We met in a diner 30 miles away because everyone in this story had learned to be careful the hard way. Nora was younger than I expected, maybe 26, with bitten nails and a folder clutched so tightly the corners had bent. I'm sorry, she said before she even sat down. I should have warned you sooner. I looked at her. Why are you helping me now? She swallowed. Because I saw what he did to the last woman who trusted him, and because he asked me to backdate paperwork after your mother died. Every sound in the diner faded. What paperwork? Nora opened the folder. Inside were emails, draft deeds, and a notarization request that had never been completed. Ryan had tried to transfer part ownership of my mother's house to a shell company 6 days after her death using copied signature pages from older documents. When the title office pushed back, he pivoted to the conservatorship plan instead. There was one more thing in the folder, a printed email from Ryan to Dana dated 9 months before my mother died. Once Diane is out of the picture, Claire will lean on me for everything. She won't even know what she's signing. I read it twice because my brain refused the first version. My husband had not simply become cruel. He had been patient, strategic, waiting. That was the bigger twist, the one that hurt worse than the laptop, worse than the drugs, worse than the courtroom plans. Ryan didn't destroy us because he snapped. He built us long before the collapse. He had looked at my grief, my trust, my family, and seen his schedule. I felt something in me go still. Not weak, not numb. Still. Like the moment before glass shatters. What I saw next shocked even Elena. Nora had one final piece of evidence. A voice memo Ryan accidentally dictated after leaving a meeting, not realizing his phone was recording. You could hear a car door slam. Then Ryan talking, irritated and fast. If Claire had signed what I told her to, this would already be finished. Diane nearly ruined everything with those questions. I should have called sooner that day, but I panicked. Doesn't matter now. Once Claire's admitted, Dana takes the girl, I get the house sold, and this whole mess is over. The recording ended. No full confession. No neat courtroom speech. Something worse. A careless truth. I pressed a hand over my mouth. He should have called sooner that day. He knew exactly what that meant. By sunset, our lawyer had enough to request an emergency protective order. The detective said they needed Ryan contained and confronted carefully. If he thought I had gone to the police, he might run. Or take Sophie. So we made a plan that still makes my stomach twist when I think about it. I went home and acted normal. I made spaghetti. I helped Sophie with spelling words. I laughed at something Ryan said about a neighbor's new fence. Every second felt like performing on the edge of a roof. Ryan watched me all evening. Not constantly. Just enough. He knew something was different. At 9:30, he brought me tea. I put chamomile in it, he said. You've been anxious. I stared at the cup in his hand and almost smiled. He really thought I would keep drinking whatever he gave me. I lifted it to my lips, let it touch them, and set it on the side table when he looked away. Then I texted the detective the one word we had agreed on. Ready. I didn't know what was coming next. I only knew it had to end that night. The confrontation started in the living room. Sophie was asleep at Tessa's house. Ryan didn't know that yet. I had told him Tessa invited her for a sleepover because we both seemed stressed and Sophie needed fun. He agreed too easily. He thought children were easier to move when they were already packed. When he realized the house was quieter than usual, he asked, "Did Sophie call?" "She's fine," I said. Ryan loosened his tie and sat in the armchair across from me. "Good. We should talk." I folded my hands in my lap so he wouldn't see them shaking. About the psychiatric hold, his entire body went still. Then he laughed. A soft, unbelieving laugh. Well, he said, so you did get into the laptop. There was no point pretending anymore. Yes. He leaned back and studied me with a kind of cold curiosity. And I know what you've been doing. He nodded slowly, like we were discussing weather. No, you know enough to be frightened. That's not the same as understanding. I wanted to scream. Instead, I said, you drugged me? You were impossible to stabilize. You filmed me. I documented behavior. You planned to take my daughter. Our daughter, he corrected. And yes, if necessary. My nails dug into my palms. Why? I asked. Why did this to me? He looked genuinely annoyed by the question. Because everything turns chaotic when people refuse to accept what they are. You were grieving, erratic, bad with money, overly attached to the child, and standing in the way of practical decisions. Practical decisions. He said it like my life was clutter in a hallway. Then I did something I hadn't planned. I asked about my mother. The room changed. Just slightly. But enough. What about her? He said. I stood. You lied about that day. Ryan's face went blank. You argued with her, I said. She caught you forging documents. She fell and you waited. He stood too now, slowly. You should be careful, Claire. Did you let her die? His jaw moved. Then he took 2 steps toward me, and for the first time in years, I didn't step back. She was old, he said. She was furious. She came at me. I didn't push her down those stairs. My voice cracked. But you waited. He stared at me, and in that silence, I had my answer. Not from his words, from the absence of denial. My whole body was trembling, but I forced out one more question. Did you ever love me? His expression changed then, and somehow that hurt worst of all. Not because it softened, because it didn't. I chose you, he said. That should have been enough. The front door opened behind him. Ryan spun. The detective stepped inside first, then 2 officers, then our lawyer. Elena stood in the doorway behind them, pale and furious, and Nora was beside her, clutching her own hands like they might fly apart. For one split second, Ryan looked less like a mastermind and more like a man who had miscalculated the room. Then he recovered. He looked at the detective and said, calm as ever, my wife is unwell. I'm glad you're here. I almost laughed. The detective held up a phone. We've got enough to discuss the medication tampering, the conservatorship documents, the recorded statements, and the timeline surrounding Diane Mersustat. Ryan's eyes flicked to me. Not fear, not yet. Betrayal. As if I had broken something sacred by defending myself. You recorded me, he said. Yes, I answered. He stared at me for one long second, and I watched him realize that the quiet woman he had spent months shrinking was gone. Then he lunged, not at the detective, at me. He didn't get far. The officers had him against the wall before I even fully processed the movement. The lamp crashed. A picture frame shattered. Ryan shouted my name once, furious, not loving, just furious. And then they were pulling his hands behind his back while he twisted and shouted that I was lying, unstable, vindictive, hysterical. Hysterical. There it was. The work men have thrown at women for centuries when truth makes them inconvenient. I stood there shaking, staring at him while he struggled in our living room. And for the first time, he looked exactly like what he was. Not charming, not misunderstood, not burdened, dangerous. And then everything changed for the last time. The weeks after Ryan's arrest were not clean or cinematic. I wish they had been. I wish justice arrived in one perfect scene and stitched every torn thing back together. It didn't. There were interviews, hearings, statements, more evidence, more tears, statements, more tears. Sophie asked hard questions in a tiny voice. I had to tell her that Daddy had lied, but not in a way that made her feel half made of poison. I had to relearn my own memory after months of sedation. I had to grieve my mother all over again, this time with truth standing in the room beside me. But Ryan's wall finally cracked. The medication tampering charge held. The protective order held. The conservatorship plan collapsed as soon as the court saw how it had been built. Nora's testimony mattered. Elena's history mattered. The detective's timeline around my mother's death forced a reopened investigation. Ryan could still deny intent, still hide behind panic and confusion and legal language, but the one thing he could no longer do was control the story. That belonged to me now. Elena got her old custody case reviewed. Tessa kept showing up with groceries and sharp opinions and the kind of loyalty that feels like family after the family illusion breaks. Dana stopped calling when she realized there would be no version of this where she came out looking noble. And Sophie slept beside me for a month. Sometimes she woke from bad dreams and asked if doors were locked. Sometimes she drew pictures of the three of us, me, her, and Tessa's ridiculous golden retriever standing in front of the house with giant smiling suns in the sky. Children heal in pieces too. You just have to keep handing them safe pieces to build with. As for me, strength did not arrive like thunder. It arrived quietly. The first morning I took medication from a bottle I filled myself. The first time I checked the mail without my hand shaking. The first afternoon I sat at my mother's kitchen table, listened to the silence, and realized it no longer sounded like defeat. It sounded like space. Space to think. Space to breathe. Space to become someone Ryan had worked very hard to erase. I still think about that night sometimes, the fever, the open office door, the blue-white glow of the laptop screen. People ask if I regret looking. No, I regret every night before it. I regret the moments I explained away because love seemed easier than suspicion. I regret how often I let someone else narrate my pain back to me until I almost forgot the sound of my own mind. I regret that my mother tried to warn me and I wasn't ready to hear her. But I do not regret opening that laptop. Because the truth did not ruin my life. The lies did. The truth was just the knife that cut me free. If you've never lived inside slow betrayal, it's hard to explain what it does to a person. It doesn't break you all at once. It teaches you to doubt the evidence of your own heart. It rearranges your normal. It makes you grateful for crumbs and ashamed of your own hunger. By the time the worst part arrives, you've already been trained to apologize for bleeding. That's why I'm telling you this. Not because I enjoy reliving it. Not because pain becomes noble when you say it out loud. But because somewhere there is another woman being called emotional in a calm voice. Another woman being told to rest while someone empties out her power drawer by drawer. Another woman wondering if she's losing her mind when really she's watching someone else try to steal it. If that woman is you, listen carefully. Confusion is not proof that you are broken. Sometimes confusion is the smoke from a fire someone else set. Trust the thing in you that flinches for a reason. Trust the memory that returns when the room gets quiet. Trust the friend who says, "This is not normal." Trust the version of yourself that existed before fear learned your name. My husband locked his laptop every night because truth is heavy, and even liars get tired of carrying it. One night, he forgot, and that was the night I stopped disappearing.